Greetings, friends. Welcome to my channel. I am Alexander Musienko. Today is Tuesday, the 13th of May, and I present to you my traditional briefing on the events that I consider relevant, important, and worthy of your esteemed attention. So the 12th of May has passed, the day when it was proposed and demanded that Putin implement a ceasefire for a period of 30 days. But the fire has not been stopped. Russian troops continue to attack Ukrainian positions. The front is hot. Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling these numerous enemy attacks. Once again, air raid alerts spread across Ukrainian regions last night and throughout the previous day. Accordingly, everything, speaking in military terms and language, from the perspective of the war, was operating as usual. No changes have been recorded. So, yet another term, another deadline that was mentioned and seriously declared, including by our partners. It has been missed by Putin. And unfortunately, this round goes to Putin. For now, we have to state this because you remember the statements from Germany and France saying there were 10 hours left, 7 hours left, 8. The countdown to the end of the day, to the moment when May 12th was supposed to end. I don't know who, outside of their own naivety, thought that Putin would suddenly cease fire because of these appeals. He won't stop the shelling on the 12th, nor the 13th, nor the 14th, not even the 15th. This also needs to be understood. Moreover, the closer we get to the date of the possible direct meeting and discussion between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations in Istanbul or elsewhere in Turkey, or on Thursday, May 15th, the greater and more serious the risks become that Russia might, on the eve of the meeting, launch combined missile strikes or carry out such acts of open terror as they like to do in order to show and demonstrate their own strength and capabilities and to show the entire civilized world. You can't look at what we have. And we are ready to use this regardless of any calls for a ceasefire, a halt to hostilities, and so on. In other words, now, the completely distorted goal and perception of how Putin sees this may give him the opportunity to do it, and the Russian dictator may take advantage of it. So be vigilant and cautious, especially these days. That's why statements have been made suggesting that we need to cease fire. The countdown has begun. And what then? Well, what might Putin be thinking right now? Let's consider what's happening right now in that satanic, the devilish lair. He sits and thinks, once again, I managed to demonstrate the weakness of the West. Once again, I saw indecisiveness and a lack of a strong stance in their actions. That means I am on the right track. That means I am doing everything right. That means the tactic of dragging out any negotiation process, which the United States, Europe, Ukraine, and so on talk about, is the correct one. I need to keep acting this way. I need to apply pressure. I need to demonstrate the West's weakness. I need to expose their position to the world. It is necessary to play on the divisions within the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union. It is necessary to sow discord, to weaken them, to demonstrate the unviability of their project, and ultimately to force them to negotiate on Russia's terms, including those that concern the West. Because Russia's war against Ukraine is not only a war to destroy Ukrainian statehood as such and to commit genocide against the Ukrainian people, which is what Russia seeks. This is truly a war for the restoration of the Russian Empire itself. I have already mentioned that this empire is supposed to include, among others, Poland, the Baltic countries, Bessarabia, Moldova, and possibly parts of Romania, and to extend its sphere of influence over the Czech Republic, Hungary, Slovakia, Bulgaria, and so on. This is the real goal of Putin's war, and he continues to pursue this strategy. He lacks the strength because indeed the Ukrainian forces, the defenders of Ukraine, have done an excellent job of destroying the potential of the Russian military. And in fact, because of this, Putin cannot continue his campaign as actively and on such a large scale as he would like, nor can he talk about a massive offensive. Instead, he is narrowing the areas of attack and concentrating his offensive efforts on trying to capture the Donetsk region. Today, this is the number one goal, for Russian forces on the front. But despite all this, the overall strategic objective remains unchanged. So, Putin himself has repeatedly said that it is necessary to eliminate the root causes of the conflict. The root causes were stated in December 2021, when Russia issued an ultimatum to the United States of America and the West, demanding a reduction of military infrastructure and essentially that NATO withdraw to the borders, as they were before the 1997 expansion. This has been mentioned repeatedly, so it also concerns Europe. And Europe, at the same time, unfortunately, is showing weakness, just like the United States of America. There are already reports in the media that now they have decided to wait until May 15th, not to impose additional sanctions against Russia. So let's wait until May 15th and see what happens in Istanbul. But we need to understand that on May 15th and 16th, it will be the same as it was on May 12th. Well, that's exactly what will happen. In other words, Putin will continue to conduct military operations. What reasons would he have to stop it? Because he sees the West's weakness? Because he feels that the West might eventually try to put pressure specifically on Ukraine, which is nonsense, to pressure the victim of aggression. But anything is possible, from the idea that he will ultimately be able to reformat policy and the strategic vision in such a way that the war really needs to be ended. But the reason is that Ukraine continues to resist, and this resistance needs to be broken, including with the help of the West. Putin has already tried to pull off such tricks before. He thought that precisely when negotiations began in February, March, and April of this year, he was counting on the West becoming his ally, that the United States of America would also put pressure on Ukraine by suspending the supply of weapons, intelligence, and so on. And in fact, there was a certain moment when we really did start not receiving intelligence and other information and so on. So certain such events did take place. This is exactly what Putin was counting on. He is looking to the West as an ally for himself to bargain by saying, I will stop now, I won't go any further. But only if you put pressure on Ukraine. At the same time, Putin still has the Zapad 2025 exercises up his sleeve. Both tanks and armored vehicles produced by Russian military-industrial complex factories are not appearing on the battlefield in Ukraine because Russia is wary that they will simply all be destroyed, burned by Ukrainian forces, as has already been demonstrated repeatedly when large quantities of this equipment were simply destroyed by Ukrainian drones, artillery fire, and other means of attack. That's why he doesn't see any point in it. The point is to move all of this to Belarus, where there are no such threats of destruction, although, who knows? Maybe some unidentified drones will reach there too during the exercises. That would actually be very good, because a burned Russian tank is one less Russian tank no matter where it is. I think you'll agree with me on that. So he also has this demonstration, which he also wants to use as a tool to pressure and influence the West, and he will try to take advantage of it. Therefore, unfortunately, it's the weakness of the West. And unfortunately, of course, so far there has been no effective pressure and no accountability for Putin for not agreeing to a ceasefire. Yes, there were consultations. Yes, indeed, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio held a phone conversation with the foreign ministers of the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Ukraine, as well as the head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas. And of course, they discussed further pressure on Russia and how to conduct negotiations. Let me remind you, Rubio will also travel to Turkey. He will be there on a visit from May 14th to 16th. Events are planned there, including the NATO Foreign Ministers Summit, which is to take place in Antalya. But it is also clear that all attention including that of the US Secretary of State, will be focused on the discussions related to the Russian-Ukrainian war. These meetings and events especially coincide on the calendar in such a way that obviously, well, they simply cannot avoid relating to May 15th, which many are pinning great hopes on. I am not pinning any hopes on it, because I understand and see that Russia is not currently interested in bringing about peace. They are interested in dragging out this process at least until the autumn, with the aim of ultimately waiting for the results of the summer campaign, and only then possibly moving toward a ceasefire. At the same time, of course, Putin will increase the pressure so that this ceasefire, if it happens, aligns as much as possible with his own vision and the conditions that are favorable to him at that particular moment. Well, this is exactly what Russia is planning and what Putin intends to continue the war until the West either stops him or decides to give up on Ukraine. This is a strategy of attrition, exhaustion, and fatigue, so that these feelings arise and so on. Meanwhile, Donald Trump never ceases to surprise and continues to make statements. He noted that the meeting in Istanbul could yield good results. I think that both leaders will be there. I was considering flying there myself. There is such a possibility, if I believe, that anything can happen, he said. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, supported this idea and noted that he would be in Istanbul, that he would be in Turkey, and that he supports Donald Trump's proposal. As of now, there has been no reaction from Putin. Well, actually, it's predictable. In addition, Trump noted that he believes Putin can cease fire, but Putin obviously, once again, does not live up to expectations, perceptions, and beliefs. Because he simply won't stop the fire just like that. If the US were to slap 500% tariffs on those countries that continue to buy Russian gas, oil, and uranium, things would be different. If they gave us additional systems and complexes right now, starting with Patriot defense, more ATACMS, German Taurus missiles, a significant number of drones, artillery shells for support, aviation strike assets, and so on. Well, that would have an impact if they continue to support our actions, including operations in Crimea and beyond. This is what would have an impact. If we had the means to strike enemy air defense systems on Russian territory, and subsequently to target those convoys and deliver strikes primarily against Russian military facilities. At present, as it seems to me, the priority targets, apart from command posts, the logistics facilities, and locations where personnel, forces, equipment, and resources are concentrated, are the sites of the military-industrial complex. We need to reduce the enemy's capability to wage war. Meanwhile, Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan suggested that in the coming days, Ukraine and the aggressor country, Russia, will indeed meet in Istanbul for negotiations to reach a compromise. The publication Haberturk reports that Fidan made the corresponding statement on Monday, May 12th. Responding to journalists' questions, he said, that Turkey's position regarding the war between Ukraine and Russia has been clear from the very beginning. According to him, Ankara seeks to fulfill its role in resolving the conflict. Fidan also noted that on the eve, Turkey was at the center of diplomatic traffic. It will remain so this week as well, because once again, there is the NATO Foreign Ministers Summit. A possible meeting? I don't think so. And once again, I emphasize my point of view. I don't think Putin will come. He will send some clerks, some of his representatives, assistants, perhaps employees of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, maybe even Minister Lavrov himself, but he will not come personally. So, Fidan said that it is important for Ankara that peace and order are established in the region. Both sides are seeking to secure the support of the United States. We are calling for a ceasefire to begin as soon as possible. Well, Putin ignored this call, including the one from the Turkish minister. He did not initiate a ceasefire. Well, once again, this confirms everything I have been saying systematically. He is interested in continuing the war. And we shouldn't hope that a ceasefire will happen right now. At then, it might happen. But we see that Russia continues to put forward its own conditions. Well, it's still difficult. And meanwhile, looks like Russian propaganda has already kicked in. The federal channels are saying the following. They are essentially rejecting the possibility of Putin participating in the meeting in Istanbul, and they called Zelensky's statement an act of clowning. This was stated in particular by the Deputy Speaker of the Federation Council of the Russian Federation, Konstantin Kosachev, to propaganda channels. He called Zelensky's intentions to meet with Putin supposedly a performance and clowning, and said that a meeting at the highest level is currently impossible. The Russian official also claimed to have found in Zelensky's current statement supposed words aimed at shifting the responsibility for the lack of negotiations onto Russia and creating an image of Moscow as the side refusing dialogue. Here, in fact, is what it's all about. Well, BT, obviously it doesn't matter what the vice speaker or even the speaker or other officials say there, because in Russia, the only thing that matters is what Putin says, not his talking heads and court minions, regardless of whatever bonuses they receive. But at the same time, this will more or less be the line that they will stick to. That is, for now, Russia is adhering to exactly this position, that Putin will not go, that he doesn't want to. And in fact, that's what's in this propaganda statement. But there is a bit of truth here. And as I mentioned, Putin will choose the strategy where delegations of different levels are supposed to meet with each other. At the same time, it's possible that various meetings will even be held, dedicated to different topics and different issues: ceasefire, the war, humanitarian matters, the return of our prisoners, illegally deported Ukrainian children, and much more. And all of this is supposed to proceed step by step, meeting after meeting, in order to, let's say, drag out the negotiation process as much as possible. Those are his intentions. And at the same time, to continue the war, which he currently does not want to end. Meanwhile, the New York Times, here's some good news for us, reports that a U.S. congressional official has confirmed that Washington has authorized Germany to transfer 100 Patriot missiles and 125 long-range artillery missiles to Ukraine. It is likely referring to the German M270 Mars platforms and HIMARS. At the same time, it is not specified whether these are ATACMS missiles, because some media outlets have reported that they could be ATACMS with a range of up to 300 kilometers, capable of reaching Russian territory, allowing for direct strikes on military targets there, or whether it is referring to a range of 70 to 80 kilometers. For now, it is unknown, but it is a very good sign that, after all, the supplies are indeed coming. This is important. Well, moving on. The EU insists on starting negotiations, and that in order to begin talks between Ukraine and Russia, a ceasefire is needed. Our position is clear. We support the proposal for a complete, unconditional 30-day ceasefire starting from May 12th. President Zelensky accepted this position without any preconditions, confirming that Ukraine is once again ready to agree to a ceasefire. So Russia must respond just as clearly, and a ceasefire is urgently needed in order to hold negotiations. Putin ignores all of this. He is not interested in any of it. Well, as long as there is nothing but appeals and no real force, he will just keep doing what he's doing. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron stated that several thousand troops from European countries could be sent to Ukraine under the leadership of France and the United Kingdom, which continue to play a leading role in this matter. He made this statement in an interview with the French newspaper Le Parisien. But He spoke about what he emphasized. He stressed that, first and foremost, the most effective security guarantee for Ukraine today is the Ukrainian army. Here is his quote. It is important to understand that authority does not depend on numbers. Today, the largest army in Europe is the Ukrainian army, which has mobilized 1 million soldiers. No other army can gather such a number of people. The main thing is the presence of troops. In Ukraine, that is the presence of the Ukrainian army, its strengthening, reinforcement, and development. And all of us, I think, understand perfectly well that this is the guarantee of our security. That is why the military needs to be supported, strengthened, and we need to join the ranks of the defense forces of Ukraine, because as you can see, despite all the statements, the war continues, and therefore we must continue to resist. And in the Bundestag, there are calls for German Chancellor Friedrich Merz to transfer long-range Taurus missiles to Ukraine as soon as possible. The Vice President of the German Bundestag, Omid Nuripur, urged the German Chancellor to approve the transfer of Taurus missiles to Ukraine as quickly as possible. Merz voted in his own name for the Taurus missiles to be delivered as soon as possible, and quickly forgetting about this after taking the oath would not be the best idea. I hope that soon we will be able to help Ukraine with everything it needs, said the Vice President of the German Bundestag. Human lives are at stake, and we are trying to protect them, he stated. Well, this is actually good, because in this way media attention and the attention of the political establishment are drawn to this issue, so that, as Nuripur rightly noted, Chancellor Merz or any other German or European politician does not forget the promises that were made, because we certainly need reinforcements in the form of such missiles. This is important for us. And in fact, the Kremlin reacted to the ultimatum form of Germany's proposal that the clocks are already ticking. If I mention Germany, then the Kremlin also reacted to the statement of the representative of the German government, Cornelius, that, well, they are counting there. Are 10 hours left, 9, 8, 7, before the Kremlin has to cease fire. So the Kremlin's press secretary Peskov stated that it is impossible to speak to Russia in the language of ultimatums. And before this warning, we had already heard a warning the day before yesterday. They were also delivered in a rather ultimatum-like form. But such language of ultimatums is unacceptable for Russia. It doesn't suit them, and you can't speak in such a way. That's all there is to it. In other words, he politely told Germany and the West to get lost yet again. That's why I hope the West will respond more actively, more effectively to these actions. But again, weakness can be observed. And unfortunately, what I call the absurdification of the negotiation process, which Putin is trying to implement by deceiving, manipulating, and in every possible way dragging out the process, is progressing today. Therefore, we should not place great hopes on Istanbul, but rather on the strength and capabilities and the development of our defense forces of Ukraine, which need to be supported, developed, and we must nurture national resistance and readiness to resist. Friends, please subscribe to my channel, leave your comments, like this video, and share it with your friends and acquaintances. I would be glad to see our community grow and expand, for there to be more of us in our club of like-minded people who, I am convinced, share a single goal: a strong, consolidated, and united Ukraine of the future. Take care of yourselves, and glory to Ukraine.